Hey, it's Andrew Lawrence from Indianapolis, Indiana.
Hi, it's Brad Bergman, Buick GMC product trainer for South Central Wisconsin and Northern Illinois.
Good afternoon, Dan Powell. Right here in Detroit primarily and outlying areas.
This is Keaton Eggleston, Cleveland, Toledo trainer for Buick GMC, and it looks like we're talking Regal today.
As you've heard from our guests, our first segment on this episode of Overdrive covers the new 2018 Regal in both its new forms. Our guests got to take an early look at the Regal TourX and Sportback, and here's what they had to say about it.
Both of these cars, I think it's one of those vehicles that I would have to say you got to see it in person. The pictures just don't really do them justice. They look great online. They look great in a catalog. Once you see them, I mean, they're a very good looking car. The wagon, I really am bananas over. But I've had two Regals. I currently drive, a GS right now. And the first thing I noticed was just space for the cabin. My car in the back seat, it's great, but it's cramped. And the back seat is much larger feeling on this one. Just the overall, the way the dimensions are inside the car and the design that went into it is definitely more thought out, I would say, with space.
And I would agree with Keaton, too. I think both of us had the conversation where we walked into the room and based on all the pictures, we fell in love with the Sportback. But as soon as we went in the room, the TourX was, the wagon just took over. I mean, it took probably 10 seconds for me to fall in love with that vehicle. The Sportback's nice. Don't get me wrong, the lines are great. You know, the grill up front looks really nice. The new tri-shield, new headlights, everything looks great. The styling is fantastic, and as Keaton mentioned, the inside is well thought out for sure. But the TourX wagon really stood out between the two.
When I walked into the room, you could definitely tell, especially with the Sportback, the family resemblance to the new LaCrosse, especially in the front. But with the wagon, I had a Saab wagon not too long ago, and so I'm kind of a wagon fan. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm personally am all over that wagon.
I wouldn't say that I'd be the oddball one out, but I definitely do have more appreciation for the TourX when I saw it in person. But the Sportback is my favorite of the two. Just the way the lines are, how it doesn't look like a hatch, it still looks like a sedan, but it's just more elevated and looks more premium than the outgoing Regal does.
I think where I'm coming from with it is that it's hard to, and we've gotten kind of spoiled because we've gotten so much new product recently between Buick and GMC, but it seems like every new car that has come out has had either a completely new design, redesign, but also along with like new technology, new safety features, some pretty cool, hard-hitting stuff. So on the Regal Sportback, I mean, it's a great-looking car. It really doesn't have any new additions to anything that we haven't gotten in the last 6 months. And so it wasn't the car, I mean, it's, again, not down-talking the car, it just wasn't as easy to get as excited about it. Whereas the wagon, I always thought wagon cars were kind of silly, never pictured myself liking any of them. And then when I saw that car in person, I suddenly said, hey, I'm a potential buyer for this one. It definitely changed my outlook on it. So, I mean, they're both great cars. The wagon definitely has an excitement factor, I think, that a lot of people see.
The story they're trying to tell with the Sportback is well comparable to like what Keaton's driving right now with the previous generation. Is it's larger, but they've cut the weight, so it's going to be a bigger vehicle, but the weight has been reduced, which is going to be something that we'll be excited about sharing with the dealers.
Now, during our conversation, we did get into engines, transmissions, and drivetrains. All Regals are going to be coming with the 2-liter turbo. They are going to offer the Regal in all-wheel drive and front-wheel drive. Front-wheel drive Regals will have a 9-speed transmission. All-wheel drive Regals will have an 8-speed. And the Regal TourX will be all-wheel drive only. That's the only way it's going to be offered.
Yep, that is correct. And David, too, when you were talking about the all-wheel drive, and guys, you can correct me, too, I think they're pretty adamant about it not being torque vectoring.
I was going to get into, yeah. You're correct.
Yeah, yes, they said that.
They said it is not. he made sure we were all listening when he said it. It is not TourX vectoring.
The one thing that I was excited about, and it's a minor thing, but also when I've talked to my sales guys about it, they've all been pretty pumped. And that is, like, the TourX, the wagon model, has a kick release tailgate. And that's standard, our lift gate, and that's on all of them. Just like on the Enclave, when you walk up to the back of the vehicle and it's unlocked, it'll shine a Buick Tri-Shield light onto the ground where it tells you where to put your foot. And all of us have had issues some way or another with vehicles that either are a little sensitive or not wanting to cooperate with that kick release, or just trying to show people exactly where they need to put their foot. And so this gives them a great just, hey, here's your bat signal. And everybody was pretty excited about that.
So what was the one thing that stood out the most to you as you took your first look at both variants of the new Regal?
I think we're going to have to get back to the space. Keaton mentioned it before, and he'd know better because he has one. But I remember sitting in the TourX, and Brad sat behind me. And Brad, I think you're a little over 6 foot, and I remember you being shocked at how much space was back there when I was in a comfortable driving position. So it's not another sedan. I mean, it is, but it's not your typical. There's going to be space inside for taller people, full-size adults, plus all your cargo with the TourX. Then, of course, with the Sportback, the hatch is what blew me away. It's not another trunk, another sedan with a small trunk opening. It's a hatch which we can fit larger objects in. So those are the two things, family-oriented, versatility, and space that really stood out to me.
I definitely agree with you on that with the space. The space is kind of what threw me off, and I know from reading and from everybody saying, oh, it was supposed to be big, but once you actually get in there and you just see how much room is in, not only the Sportback, but I was just surprised by the TourX and just how much actual space there was, not only for the second row occupants, but actual storage space there in the back. And then me being really thinking about buying a Sportback, when I was looking at the back of the trunk, that Sportback has a ton of room there in the back. And I have a LaCrosse right now, and even though LaCrosse is a 15 LaCrosse, even though it's the biggest car, has the smallest trunk for 15 model year. So this car, or the Regal, I should say, the Sportback, has plenty of space in the back for what I needed to do.
That's what we keep telling all the dealers. They keep, if you're going to do wagons, there's only one way you can do it. It's got to be aggressive. And they keep going back to, the CTS wagon. Like, that was a vehicle that, in my opinion, was done right. It looked aggressive. As Keaton just said, it looked like it was going fast, sitting still. You can't look at it as a family mobile. It's got to be sporty. It's got to be young. It's got to be modern. It's got to look good, and it does. So that was one of the things that blew me away and that drew my attention to it. It doesn't look like an older wagon. It looks good.
What about infotainment? What's new there? I know that the new GMC Terrain that's coming out soon has infotainment 3.0. What's up for the Regal?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he said that 3.0 would be introduced like halfway through the model year for Regal, but it was going to debut with 2.6. But I could be wrong with that.
I think you're absolutely right.
What about safety features? Is there anything new that's going to be debuted on the Regal as far as safety is concerned?
The active hood. So the active hood, I think they said. Well, yeah, that is new for Regal.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. That is new, and it's new for Regal. So, I mean, I think a better question is what is new, and then what is new for Regal owners? You know what I mean? That'd be one of those things. Pedestrian braking is going to be new for them. And I think there's one more. I want to say the low speed front automatic braking will be new for them as well.
Okay. So, I mean, what was that thing you mentioned? What was that thing you mentioned first?
Which one? The active hood?
Yeah, is that something for pedestrian safety?
So, yeah, for some reason you were to get into an accident with a pedestrian, there's actually pyrotechnic charges in the hinges of the hood that will pop the hood up 4 inches to help ease the blow of a pedestrian hitting the vehicle.
As Keaton led off with at the beginning of this, he mentioned like with all these we've been pretty spoiled the last couple of years with all this new technology, and so it's really we're going to be launching a vehicle where nothing's going to be new to the dealer, so the things we'll have to focus on is what is new for Regal owners, and focusing on those key features: the active hood, the lane keep assist will be new, and pedestrian braking. So that'll be a story to tell. Those are things that Regal owners won't be used to, that we'll have to go into pretty good detail with.
Well, I want to thank Andrew Lawrence, Keaton Eggleston, Bradley Bergman, and Dan Powell for sitting down and taking the time to record that with me. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Now, moving on, I want to talk about podcasts. I know this sounds weird, a podcast about podcasts, but there's a reason for it. Let me give you a little backstory. Whenever I talk to trainers to set up recording sessions or talk to trainers about podcasts that I happen to be listening to, it seems like there aren't a lot of trainers out there that have given podcasts a try. So I wanted to promote podcasts in general, not just what we're doing here, because there's some really great content out there, whether you just want to be entertained or if you want to learn something new. I guarantee you, if you happen to have a hobby or interest, there's a podcast for it. So what I wanted to do was sit down with Tory Ball, who is as much a podcasting geek as I am, and we're going to talk about podcasts. So stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Tory Ball, and I'm the Cadillac product trainer for most of the state of Ohio. And I have been listening to podcasts for quite a bit, quite a long period of time. We actually started off in the whole podcast world. My friends and my husband and I, we actually tried to make a podcast about 12 years ago. And we we weren't very successful at it, because to make a podcast, it sure takes a pretty sizable work ethic, and you have to be very, very organized to get this thing together. So we made like 2 episodes a very, very long time ago of this podcast, and it didn't work out for us. But I've been consuming podcasts for a heck of a long time now, and especially since I started with GP Strategies, with being a Cadillac trainer. I'm in the car a lot by myself, and it's just kind of nice to listen to radio programs effectively that interest me. So that's how I got into podcasting.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So my wife actually is the one who got me into podcasting. She has a desk job at a bank. She does risk assessment for banks and handles procedures and policies. And so she's in front of a computer all day reading documents, checking things, and she puts her headphones in and pulls up a podcast, and she's listened to so many more than I have, but she's the one who's giving me what's new and what's good to listen to. So she's kind of my source for what I've been listening to here of late. So what I want to do, just to kind of open everyone up to the good stuff that's out there, I wanted to kind of run back and forth. We've each got our top 5 podcasts that we're listening to right now, and I'll tell you right off the bat, they're not in any current order, because I don't know that I could rate my top 5 actually going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are just the 5 that I'm listening to. Yeah, how do you feel about that? Are you kind of the same opinion?
I know you told me to pick out 5 podcasts, and I think I snuck an extra 2 on this list in here that I'm going to just briefly mention. But even just narrowing it down to that, it was hard. It was like trying to pick which finger I didn't want anymore. It was difficult.
Nice. That's awesome. All right. So do you want to start us off, or you want me to take the first one?
Sure, I could do the first one. So my first one that comes to mind, just because we are all in the car business, is, of course, Car Talk. Now, Car Talk didn't start out by being a podcast. Car Talk is a radio program that you may have heard on your local NPR station. You may have heard it on there for, gosh, I don't even know how long. It's been on. I have memories of listening to this radio show from when I was a kid. So you've got Click and Clack, the Tappet Brothers. It's a classic car show, but they give out car advice. If you've never heard the radio show, it's car advice with a great sense of humor. They do the Puzzler. They update the podcast stream every week, but they do not create new episodes because one of the brothers had passed away in the last few years. So they don't make new episodes, but the classic ones are very entertaining and great to listen to.
Agreed. That it's not on my top 5, but that's a good one. I remember as a kid listening to that in the car with my dad. You know, that was something they aired on NPR, and it's funny. My dad was a mechanic. Now he does technical training, but it was funny. We would listen to the callers that would call in with issues with their car, and my dad was always trying to figure out exactly what the Tappet brothers were going to come up with as an answer for what the issue with the car was. So it's kind of fun, you know, good bonding experience. But yeah, definitely some good stuff with car talk. All right, my first one out of my 5. Shoot. And by the way, my list did change from the last time we did this. I'm actually going to throw Invisibilia up there. Was that one of yours? Am I stealing one of yours?
No, that wasn't one of mine. I have a couple other podcasts in that ilk, but no, not that one. That's a good show,
okay,
though.
So I threw it in there, and the only reason I threw it in there is because I've been listening to it a lot here of late because they just came out with their 3rd season. So 3rd season's out, but this podcast focuses on things that, invisible things that have a pretty intense influence on how we live our lives. So the intro or the first episode for season 3 focuses on emotions, and it's actually pretty heavy. My wife was the one who told me that the 3rd season was out, so I knew to go ahead and pull it up and start listening to it. And she said the first one kind of choked her up. So it's a little intense, but it's very insightful and it's very entertaining. So Invisibilia is one you should definitely check out. So what's your next one?
So my next one, I told you I had a couple along that line. So the next one I chose was Radiolab. And Radiolab is a well-produced show. It's made famous not only for its sound engineering, which is just amazing, just the quality of the audio that they have, but their deep dives into some really fascinating stories that just really don't hit the news and things like that. The episodes are generally standalone pieces. Occasionally there's a 2-parter or they update one. But I have a couple examples that are really good episodes that really just struck me as very interesting. There's one called Famous Tumors from a couple years back. It's the story about Henrietta Lacks. There was actually recently an HBO movie about Henrietta Lacks that had Oprah in it in the last couple weeks here. So you may already know that story, but it's really a fascinating take on her whole situation. Basically, she had this form of cancer. They sampled her cancer cells, but they were taken without her permission or knowledge, and they've basically helped science create all kinds of modern cancer treatments. And it's just a really interesting moral dilemma about how this whole thing works. And then the other episode I'd recommend highly is an episode called Cities from a few years back, and that covers many aspects of city life. They talk about big cities, small towns. They talked about this place called Centralia, PA. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that one. But it's a former town. They have 10 residents now, I think, maybe. And it has an active, massive underground fire that's burned for the last 55 years. And they're estimating that the coal vein can burn for another 250 years. It's really interesting. And it's just, they have these amazing stories that they bring you into the whole world. It's amazing.
Very cool. Yeah, when we had talked about that before, I had to look it up. I had to Google that just because I didn't believe it. And yeah, sure enough, underground fire. That's kind of wicked. So, let's see. What is this, second one or third one? This second one. My second one is We're Alive. And it's, I'm a big Walking Dead geek. There's a lot of big Walking Dead geeks out there. I consider myself one of the bigger Walking Dead geeks, but We're Alive is kind of like The Walking Dead for your ears. And it's really cool. This podcast has absolutely ruined audiobooks for me. The thing about audiobooks is typically you get one person or two people that are just reading, right? And that gets kind of boring for me after a while. Here, you're getting all the characters, you're getting all of the sound effects that go along with what's actually happening in the storyline. So there's gunfire, and you hear the growling of the zombies and people getting attacked, and it's sensory overload, even though you're only getting all of this, through your ears. But it's pretty intense at times. It's super entertaining. I believe there's 70 some odd episodes, so it's a lot of stuff. But you'll definitely get a kick out of it. If you like The Walking Dead, check out We're Alive.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting one, actually. So I have to say, I'm kind of waiting for The Walking Dead to end before I actually start watching it, because it sounds like one of those shows where you're going to just get irritated every time the episode ends. So I haven't even started with it yet, but it sounds like something I'd watch. So, and then I'll get into all the podcasts and everything else. So the next one on my list was actually Serial, and this is the more recent podcast that seems to have gotten everyone into podcasts lately. So the first season, it's created and hosted by a woman named Sarah Koenig, but Sarah investigates the murder of a high school senior, Hae-Min Lee, who was allegedly killed by her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend named Adnan Syed. So the whole first season focuses in on Adnan and his trial, some of the evidence in the case. You're going to find it pretty compelling. I mean, I think most of the whole world found this pretty compelling. Serial got me more recently into both Undisclosed and a series called S-Town. I'm going to talk about Undisclosed a little bit more in a minute. S-Town was it's under that same umbrella of Serial. Season 2 of Serial focused more in on Bo Bergdahl, so if you remember that from a few years ago. I didn't find that second season as compelling as the first, but I did feel like I walked away with a much deeper understanding of what was going on with Bo Bergdahl.
I didn't actually finish the second season. It didn't hold my interest, but that's not to take anything away from season 1. Season 1 was amazing. And I like how they basically take it from start to finish. I mean, she is a true investigative reporter, because she goes through and she picks up a lot of the stuff that, the courts either dropped the ball on or did not even know about. And, it's the only thing that turned me off with season 1. And again, I love season 1, but the one thing that kind of irked me about it was the closure. There wasn't that much closure to it. So if you listen to it, you'll see what I'm talking about, which is kind of what's going to lead me into my next pick out of my top 5. It's Up and Vanished. And Up and Vanished, I consider very similar to Serial. But there's a little more closure to it. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. Actually, behind the scenes, a little inside baseball here. David and I have been chatting about this for the last few months, so we both really like this podcast here. And it was all I could do not to put it on my list, just so you know.
True. It's absolutely incredible. I started listening to this while I was doing a long drive to the East Coast of North Carolina, one of my dealers out there. And started it up, binge listened to I think there were only 4 or 5 episodes out at the time. And then of course, every day, jump in the car that Monday morning, there was a new episode up. That was the first thing I was listening to. But it deals with the disappearance of a high school teacher, Tara Grinstead, in a small Georgia town. Actually, not too terribly far from where my old territory used to go. I used to drive pretty close to this area, and it's definitely rural Georgia. But anyway, it goes through and again reinvestigates everything that happened, because it's still categorized as a disappearance because they never recovered a body. But as I said before, there's a little more closure because they do come to a resolution, but it's super, super exciting following it all the way through. This was edge of your seat stuff, and I was absolutely blown away by it. If I had to pick a number 1, this would probably be my number 1. I don't know how the others would shuffle, but Up and Vanished is good stuff.
All right. Okay. Now, the next one on my list is a podcast called Undisclosed. I mentioned that just a minute ago. Basically, I got into Undisclosed because I started listening to Serial, and then I finished Serial, and I wanted to know more about this whole case. And the interesting thing about Undisclosed is it's hosted by Rabia Chaudhry. She's a childhood friend of Adnan Syed's. So she's the one that actually brought it to the attention of Sarah Koenig for the Serial podcast. And what happened is when the episodes, when Serial started airing, Rabia felt like the whole story wasn't being told. And so there was a lot more evidence out there. Sarah Koenig was working with, I can't remember if it was around 12 episodes, right? She was just kind of stuck with those 12 episodes. She couldn't do any more than that. But she got together with a couple of other bloggers, and they're all lawyers, to create a podcast where they felt like Serial wasn't able to explore all the aspects of the trial. So if you like Serial, Undisclosed, kind of, if you felt like you didn't get much of closure that way, you could go on to Undisclosed and get, at least more in-depth information about what happened. So that's season 1 of Undisclosed. Season 2 of Undisclosed, they focused on a different trial. Actually, this one's in Georgia too. The accused's name is Joey Watkins. His swift conviction, you're pretty much made to question it in the whole podcast there. And his story is also very, very compelling.
Okay, very cool. By the way, I think a few minutes ago you mentioned S-Town. I just listened to the first episode of S-Town this morning on my way to Charlotte, and it is hilarious. What's the redneck guy that lives in? I call him a redneck. He actually seems like he's super intellectual and extremely liberal for where he lives in Alabama. But I was the first episode's hilarious, just listening to him and some of his southern euphemisms, and it's a riot. But yeah, that's definitely one I'm going to start listening to. Is that on your list, by the way? Did I steal that from you by bringing that up?
That one is on my list, but I just want to warn the audience that first episode is pretty funny. It gets pretty dark. It is. Just so you know, it gets really, really dark. I just want to warn you. There's a very in-depth description of a suicide in there, just so everybody knows. It is rated E for explicit in the Apple app, or the Apple podcast app. So just so everybody knows, but it's really fascinating. This guy, there's no one like this man in the whole world. There's just nobody like him, and it's so interesting. It's a deep dive into who this person is and how he affects the town around him, and how what he thinks of his surroundings, and if he can do anything to change it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty accurate description of it. The guy is just over the top eccentric. He's got a thick Southern accent, and he is just a riot to listen to. It seems like throughout half the first episode, he's just carrying on a conversation with himself, and some of the stuff he says is just so off the wall. But at the same time, you pick up the fact that he's insanely smart, just off the charts smart. So it's intriguing. Definitely check out S-Town. So sorry, I didn't mean to skip on to one of your next ones, but you mentioned it. I had to bring it up because I listened to it this morning. It's pretty good. I'll move on to my fourth one, I believe, and that one is Sword and Scale. And Sword and Scale is a true crime podcast. It goes back and examines all sorts of crimes, ranging from, domestic violence to, murder to, serial killers, all kinds of stuff. But the way in which it's done, it's very professionally done. The gentleman who does it, Mike, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he does an exceptional job with it. And some of the content that he's put out, there was an episode, I don't remember which number it was, but it centers around something called the Franklin cover-up. And I'm not sure. Actually, Tori, where do you live? You're in where, Ohio?
I'm near Cleveland. It's Cuyahoga County.
Have you heard of the Franklin cover-up?
I'm not sure. Maybe I haven't listened to that episode. I think I'm a little behind.
Okay, no. Actually, that's one of the very first. I mean, that's very early on. But no, the Franklin cover-up, I believe, takes place somewhere in Ohio. I don't remember the name of the town, but very interesting. It almost sounds like it's conspiracy theory stuff. There's some really crazy, like child prostitution, child sacrifice, but it's all very major players in the government up there that are taking part in it. And I know that sounds way over the top, but the way it's covered, it seems like there might be some legitimacy to it. So it was a nail biter of an episode. It's actually a 2-parter. They do it in 2 full episodes, but that would be probably the first one I would start off with. But that one's called The Franklin Cover-Up. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, I listen to that podcast too, and I have to admit, Sword and Scale makes me want to make sure the doors are locked like 4 extra times at night. So it's one of those that makes you, a little paranoid.
Yeah, what's the True Monsters, or Monsters Are Real, or something like that? The motto for
the worst monsters are real.
Thank you. That's what it is. Yeah,
I think that's it. Yeah,
you got it. Cool. What's your next one?
All right, so this looks like it's the last one on my list. This podcast is called Matt and Mattingly's Ice Cream Social. Now, I'm just going to warn everybody, this is also rated explicit in Apple's podcast app, just so everybody knows. They are a couple of Las Vegas improv comedians, and it's basically about their lives, and they talk a little bit about, some of the news and some of the silliness that's going on there. But they also have an audio guy. His name is Jacob. But think sort of in the vein of Howard Stern with them. If he talked about behind the scenes showbiz in Las Vegas, and he made up silly characters and voices, and they talk a little bit about sports sometimes, and video games and toys and all kinds of cool things. And then there's also a little quiz that they do every episode called Jock versus Nerd, which is kind of fun to listen to. So they ask the nerd the jock questions, they ask the jock the nerd questions, and it's kind of funny to listen to. So I just like their rapport. They're very entertaining. They're funny guys.
I'll have to give that one a try. The last one on my list is something called The Way I Heard It. And The Way I Heard It is actually done by Mike Rowe. So the voice is very familiar. I mean, I don't know of anyone who has more of a voice for radio than Mike Rowe. I mean, he sounds good coming through the speakers in my truck. So The Way I Heard It, it's basically these very short, 5 to 7 minute stories. But the way he tells the stories, he is just a masterful storyteller. The last one I listened to was about a gentleman named Bill Hickman. Bill Hickman was a stunt driver. And the story starts off with Bill Hickman is driving a station wagon with a trailer on the back, an empty trailer, and he's driving to a racetrack. He's chasing a Porsche down the road. And he's trying to get to this racetrack with this Porsche. And as he's following this Porsche, they round a corner up ahead, and as the Porsche goes around the corner, it loses control and crashes. Well, he kind of tells that story as being the beginning of his stunt driving career. Bill Hickman was the stunt driver who did Bullet, done several other movies, won countless awards for his work with car chase scenes. But they talk about how just amazing he was as a driver, as a person. And then you get to the end of the story and you find out the gentleman in the Porsche that he was with chasing to the racetrack was actually James Dean. And when he rounded that corner and crashed, that was the demise of James Dean. So he's got a great way of telling these stories and unfolding to a little bit of a twist or a surprise that caps everything off. And you'll see what I'm talking about if you listen to it. Just the best storyteller I think I've ever heard. He's top notch. So The Way I Heard It by Mike Rowe. Check it out. I think that's it. Was that your 5 and my 5, or we're done?
No, I think that's it. We had some honorable mentions, I think. The ones that we didn't get to, I know we both listened to this, are the, the name's escaping me. There it is. It's the Welcome to Night Vale, the Night Vale podcasts. They are good. If you like things that are story driven, podcasts aren't just about, shock jocks and news and stuff like that. You can listen to a fictional story. It's a great all their podcasts are great. What are the other two that you listen to?
Other two. You mean you? Oh, you mean
from Welcome to,
I don't
to
remember.
Night Vale? Yeah.
From Welcome to Night Vale. Alice Isn't Dead and Between the Wires, or sorry, Within the Wires. Those were the two that all done by the same people. It's those are all, and you can tell they're done by the same people. The way they come off, it's very similar, but different in their own right. So yeah, definitely good ones to check out. Anything from Welcome to Night Vale is awkwardly entertaining. Is that a good way to put it?
I think that's pretty accurate. Yes.
All right. Well, with that, we'll take links to all of these, and we'll make sure to post them on the Trainer Hub on Facebook, so you can find them. And definitely give some of these a listen. I guarantee if you take the time to set them up on your phone on a long drive to your next store, it breaks up the drive a little bit more. It's something other than music. Nothing against music, but it's something different. Sometimes something different is nice. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the podcasts we've given you here to listen to, plus what we're recording currently. Keep up with Trainer Overdrive as we release future episodes, and we thank you for listening. Thanks, T-Ball, for helping me put all of this together. I'm actually going to check out some of the podcasts that you mentioned that I haven't listened to. We will be linking all of these podcasts on the Facebook Trainer Hub, so check them out. You may find something that you really like that helps to pass the time as you're driving to your next dealership. But that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time.